Thanks for giving me the opportunity on this platform to speak a bit about what we've done in the past, and also what might come in the not so distant future. To have a bit of a discussion as well, hopefully at the end of the talk and the chat. The Architecture Foundation has been really an institution that we've been involved and interested in for a very long time. We also had an exhibition at some point. I think I can't recall exactly the year, but it must have been about a decade ago, where we showed what our entire portfolio, what we had put together until then. I'm going to start with a couple of images, almost a potpourri, a real collage of things that we've done in the past. Then I'm going to concentrate a bit on projects, digital projects that we have done with an architectural focus. The interactivity is going to start kicking in at some point in this entire development, and I'm going to finish off with some cultural projects and interactive projects, so that we can arrive at this entire discussion. How do we deal with the current lockdown and the current situation, and how do cultural institutions and what tools they would have at their disposal, and what we can do as architects and digital architects to help and support that process. I've also put together a little playlist, which we can actually make available at the end of the entire session. I'm going to start with, I hope that you can actually see my screen now. The entire lecture is just going to be videos. So I'm going to try to keep with the idea that for us, architecture is something that is in motion, even though sometimes it's very static when it comes to its physicality. But our perception of it and what happens within it really is anything but static. So in the background, you're seeing what we call a show reel, a real amalgamation of all sorts of projects that we've done. Tapio Snellman, who's also here in the list of attendees, as I can see, and myself, we started a studio 1999, more than 2 decades ago. We started working together in Tokyo, but then we started with the work in London as a studio. We've always been torn between film, architecture, working at the boundaries of, let's say, artistic, but also very commercial projects. We had a very strong interest, and we still have, in design, both graphic design, but also 2D design. And for about, I would say, the last decade, the intersection of 3D and interactivity has been like one of the main focus points in our practice. As you can see, we have quite a number of architectural projects that we're showing here in this show reel. We were lucky to work with some preeminent architecture offices in London and in the world, particularly in the first decade of our existence as a studio. We also started our work in let's say, more linear fashion, and we used the tools that were available to us at that point in time, which is video, and also the emerging animation. And we were doing, let's say, architectural visualization before there even was a term for it. So we were always very interested in the temporal element and aspect of it, in the combination of movement, physicality, but also the perception of the space, music, and the entire atmosphere that music would create, and the kind of message that you would get across using a specific soundtrack were an integral part of our entire output, if I can say so. The main medium that we were using, let's say, was a very linear way of experiencing these sort of mini architectural telegrams, video telegrams, if you want to call them. It was sort of a play and pause type of medium with not a lot of interactivity. In the, I would say in the last decade, the tools that we've been using have developed massively. So from a, and that might sound a bit technical, from a pre-rendered visualization and the use of pre-rendered images for movies, the trend has been towards using what is now being referred to real-time engines, game engines. So the images would be created on the fly without the need for pre-rendering. And that has, on one hand, created a whole lot of new opportunities when it comes to the entire process of creating the images for architecture. But it also means that a lot of the options that are now open include interactivity, and that is something that in the linear nature, let's say, of a film on a play and pause, has been expanded massively. And this is like now where we are focusing our efforts, also as a studio, in pretty much everything that we do, be it very commercial, but also be it for, let's say, cultural institutions, is that we're looking at the juncture, and we're looking at ways of combining the interactivity and three-dimensionality. Also, the advent of virtual reality has really changed, let's say, the output methods of what we were doing. In principle, we're still working with the same set of tools and the same type of ideas, and we want to portray and show 3D space. But the tools and the output methods that we have available now, particularly with virtual reality, have really pushed it to an area that we didn't actually see coming at the beginning of our career, let's say in the beginning of the 2000s. But before I get to the virtual reality aspect of our work, I'm going to present just a couple of other projects that are relevant to the overall discussion of like how are we going to be dealing with a digital spatial experience, and how we're going to portray that going forward, also as architects, but also from as museums, galleries, or cultural institutions. One of the projects I want to highlight is the Architectural Biennale in 2006. And hopefully this is also going to be playing sometime soon now. We were approached to create a number of installations based on video at 3D. I have to apologize. I will have to try to see like what was going on here. Here we go. It was a time when urbanity and city was and cities in general were a massive theme for everybody in architecture. And it was about 2006 when half of the world's population started living in cities, or we had reached that threshold. We were actually perfectly positioned to do a lot of work using 3D animation, but also video. And with these technologies of pre-rendered animations, videos, a combination of typography, a lot of movement, projections, we were able to put together a set of installations that will be talking a lot about the content, but in an architectural three-dimensional space. And we were able to fuse as well a lot of videos that we had taken in the decade before with abstracted models of cities. So we looked at a number of mega cities. We recreated these in 3D, and we conjoined, so to speak, typography with this new type of abstract topology, and then rendered out a 360-degree film for the Corderia in the Arsenale. Leading on from this, then there was a follow-up exhibition at the Tate, Global Cities, and we were also invited to show a version of that film in a different setting. And we recreated the feeling, but now in a slightly more elongated version. It was one of the highlights, let's say, of our overall collaborations in the studio, having a piece at Tate Modern. You can see a couple of these abstract city textures and environments that we created. That would be talking about the different aspects of in the film. The other important element and aspect of our work is the visualization, let's say, of three-dimensional or three-dimensional visualization of information. We had a huge amount of themes that we wanted to go through, from density to, in this case, concentration of people. And we had all sorts of other data models that were given to us in a very and simple, boring way, spreadsheets, basically. And we took that as quite a challenge to visualize that information and put it almost into a narrative as well, and with a three-dimensional presence within a film. Now to a different type of project overall. It's a type of digital or a set of applications, of digital applications that started to grow out of linear films that we were working on. We worked with Herzog and de Meuron on a number of projects, but in particular, they asked us to do a animation about the Philharmonic, the Elbe Philharmonic concert hall in Hamburg. And we worked on that project, I think in 2009, 2010, prior to the entire hall opening. And the film was successful in portraying what wasn't built yet. And we were also thinking, how can we actually expand what we did there, which was a linear film, and bring something completely different now as well to the mix. Unfortunately, it was also, again, quite early with our digital approach to this here, and to try to use these tools really just as tools and not really as content. So the context for us is more pretty much always not the technology that we're using, but is what is the outcome and what we're portraying and the story and the narrative behind it. In this case, we were trying to take the content and the models that we had created for the animation and use those in a way so that the space could be a lot more interactive, and users could experience and explore the architecture at a different pace, and also in a much more personalized manner. So we envisioned something that would cross from a film, from a video, into something that would run on a website, in 3D, but also would be able to run as an application, as a 3D application. And this entire kind of suite of solutions we called Convergent architecture apps. So let's say a linear medium, and a very interactive medium, a website, and different types of expressing, or different types of technology would then create a convergent also understanding of the and communication of the architectural project. So while we thought that this sort of like concept and idea, is easy to understand, and that people would be open to, and clients in this respect, and institutions would be open to using such a set of tools, to communicate this to the general and wider public. It has taken about 2 to 3 years, to actually convince them to reuse the content that we had in these or with new tools that we were proposing. And it's still, we're facing quite an uphill struggle with many of our interlocutors and clients, in trying to make a strong case for tools that would enhance and would bring more people to architecture, or to specific experiences when it comes to built environment. There wasn't really an appetite to bring such tools to the mix of other media that they had available. People, even today, are still thinking a lot about animation and renders when it comes to architectural visualization and communicating space in general. There's only really a handful, let's say, of more advanced or people interested in advanced tools. And we're seeing that slowly, the acceptance of these tools is increasing. after the L Philharmonic saw that the website and the 3D application were really successful in widening their audience, their digital audience, they also talked to us about a interactive kiosk type of presentation. So instead of printing all sorts of information pieces and having paper magazines to present the project, you know, they finally engaged with us and asked us like if we had other ideas, what we could do with the architectural model or the idea of presenting you know, the Philharmonic Hall in other ways. So we jumped at the opportunity and created this interactive 3D model. So in essence, you can look at it as being, we have the job of model makers, but on steroids, if you like. Looking at the old-fashioned concepts of having, let's say, a cut-through model where you can see the details of a building. This is also very interesting because it gives you more context. It gives you context when it comes to how it's embedded in the city, the scale of the object itself. So it's a combination, let's say, of a large-scale model with a very detailed model. Plus that you would also have like all the options of getting additional information on specific functions in the building, and that it's very immediate. I mean, even kids had a lot of fun in interacting with this entire application. So this has actually really led us to a whole set of new applications, and to also like think about how could these tools actually be used in a more commercial environment. Let's say many of our clients started using more interactive and more digital tools. So the last 5 years has we saw a massive development, particularly when it comes to real estate and developers. They found positive arguments, you know, when using these tools, particularly towards their potential clients. Our developments in the digital format also enables us to combine databases and to link these digital tools with very new and modern tools. Social media integration, as well as the entire analytics and big data integration is quite an important aspect and element, you know, to this. So it's an interesting development that we have undergone. Let's say from a very linear type of tool, which is a film where you only press play and pause, to something that is becoming incredibly integrated as the ramifications are quite enormous. You integrate sales tools, a database, real-time communication, launches in different locations worldwide, multilingual tools, etc. Now, I also want to talk about another element of our work, which has, let's say, in some ways, less to do with architecture, but it has a lot to do with our love and obsession of cities, cultures, and urban conglomerations, if you like. It's travel. We worked for more than 20 years now in this sector, and 10 years, solid 10 years, we worked with Lufthansa, the German airlines. We had ideas and concepts for interactive content that is being shown on the screens long haul. We were one of the first ones to produce that type of content for such a niche market. And our engagement with this industry has really developed, and we have gone on to work with a lot of like large organizations, both from a technological standpoint, like Panasonic, for instance, but also with other large organizations like British Airways, Cathay Pacific, Air Canada, etc. So now the interesting elements that from a, let's say, a 2D aspect of design and screen design, if you like, on one hand, and then on the other hand, our strong interest in architecture, three-dimensionality, animation, and anything that sort of like moves in 3 dimensions, that these elements have started to combine. And this is probably a good point now to talk about the emergence of the real-time engines and the game engines. So we started using these tools pretty early on. And the fact that we had spent so much time, let's say, with architectural representation also led us to being incredibly focused on the details of the representation in real time. It took quite a while, both for the, let's say, the software, but also for the hardware, the computer hardware, to be able to cope with the type of quality that we wanted to achieve when it comes to the image and the representation of 3-dimensionality. Currently, we are in a position that the real-time engines that we're using, in combination with the power of the hardware and let's say the kind of craft that we developed at creating this image and the images of 3D space, materials, lighting, camera movement, etc. It's on a level that is unparalleled. Equally, we have been dealing, let's say, with interactivity, 2D typography for a very long time. And because these game engines offer the interactivity aspect and element that other, let's say, platforms wouldn't, for us, this is an incredible marriage of these 2 large areas that we have been working in and we're always very interested. Let's say 2D design, typography, graphics, and 3-dimensionality, with the film and architecture. And while the team has been slowly developing, these tools and the craft of working with the real-time engines in 3D, also the output options have developed. This project here is probably a culmination, let's say, of our expertise when it comes to image accuracy and 3-dimensional representation with real-time engines in combination with interactivity. And that actually happens in aviation. This is a collaboration with British Airways. British Airways has recently launched, I mean, I know that it's quite crazy to talk about travel sort of like week 5 of a complete lockdown, and this industry is now in tatters. And I don't know if this industry will ever pick up or how long it will take to reach the pre-corona crisis levels. But it's still a project that we're very proud of, and it actually shows and illustrates quite well the points that I was making, the combination, let's say, of interactivity and also the capabilities that we developed as digital architects, so to speak, in this environment. It's the interesting element or aspect to this is that the output methods when it comes to virtual reality have and the hardware in itself with very powerful computers, that has changed in the last 2 to 3 years massively, and we're able now to deploy such projects with an incredible image quality, a very high performance. In an environment that can be used, let's say, by clients like British Airways as tools, not only for marketing and communication, but also as a more ecological type of marketing, if you like. Let's say airlines, and this is a very specific example, let's say, of this point, like how digital tools could potentially be more eco-friendly, let's say, than other tools available. Airlines would produce a set of seats, or even a number of these sets, and then ship them around the world. That would cost an enormous amount of time, and it would also be incredibly the carbon footprint of this here would be really awful. And this is what traditionally has happened. So a lot of these were shipped around the world, but since we have these tools available now, this can be a much better solution. There's a lot more interactivity as well involved in this. The type of information that is being retained is also higher, and the fact that you can experience something at scale is also a very important aspect and element to this. Yeah, there's not that much more that I can add right now when it comes to the virtual reality experiences with airlines. We've done a number of them. So Air Canada has actually been the first airline to engage with us on that type of project. Then we also like worked with one of the largest ones in Asia, Cathay Pacific, to launch their products. But every time actually we engaged with clients, they really realized that we do bring something else to the table, given this, let's say, DNA that we had with our architecture roots. And the three-dimensionality always plays a role in all of these projects. So now I'm trying to bridge as well the let's say this entire DNA of our projects, and like how we developed from let's say architects with an interest in film and animation, and then going into something that would potentially be relevant in today with the Corona crisis and the lockdown. It's a project that I wanted to show you that we actually did about 5 years ago. And again, we were a bit too early, and the adoption of these tools, will take some time. But I think in the current crisis, this might be really pertinent, to a lot of cultural institutions. It's the idea of creating digital twins and spaces in 3D that can be embellished, if you like, with a lot of functions that real institutions offer. This project actually never got built, so it's really a paper project, if you like, or in our case, a digital project. The studio Harry Guger being a professor of architecture in Lausanne, and has also been leading the Herzog and de Meuron team for Tate Modern. He got approached, and they developed the concept and the idea of Mosaic Maya, which would be, well, the plan was to be located in Guatemala. And they asked us whether we would want to work with them in representing and showing the designs, not only using renders, but also using moving image. So we jumped at the opportunity. We also explained to the studio that we would be very interested in developing more than just an animation. And that's how the idea came to fruition, to create a set of tools, again, digital tools, to show something that is only actually a concept. And that's how we came up with the idea to create a digital museum, which would have a lot more functions than just a video. And while about 5 years ago, we were not actually thinking about a situation like today's situation with the coronavirus and the lockdowns, the functions that we envisioned here are incredibly pertinent, and given that we have the situation today. So we would be creating a digital twin of the museum using various different methods. And this digital twin would be suitable to be shown as an application. It could be also like done as a special website. But the interesting element to it is that it would help institutions and museums to reconnect and re-engage with a public that is now missing from their museums. So you can read through the press what sort of issues the museums are facing currently. Not only that, obviously their income has dried up because of the lockdown and the closures, but also the fact that the museums cannot or don't have the right tools to engage with the audience. And in many ways, let's say a virtual experience of a museum could link with interactive options a lot of the functions that a museum actually offers in normal times. If you're thinking about membership, specific exhibitions can be put up again, and then they can be made available to the members only. There could be special areas within this virtual, let's say, museum that is specifically set up only for members. You could have guided tours in this interactive digital twin of a museum. Equally, you can think of merchandise and the entire shop culture, almost, if you like, when it comes to museums. So there's also a huge economic factor for the museums. You can think of education sessions. You can think of a library, kids programs. All of these functions that the museums used to offer would now be possible with such a digital platform. The tools are out there. And in specifically, I'd like to talk about one development, a very recent development. So many of these real-time projects that we created were dependent on very performant hardware. So it had to be a high-spec computer with a very strong graphics card that would be able to handle this type of application. I'm sure that everybody has already heard about cloud computing. And this has been a concept that might have been around for a while, but there hasn't really been a solution until very recently. So there are companies out there that offer cloud computing for such game engines. So in effect, anyone with an internet browser could access something that is being rendered in the cloud, and the experience would be as if you would have an incredibly high spec computer. So this opens up the mass access for pretty much everybody to really advanced, let's say, experiences based on computer engines and on game engines. We have engaged with a couple of institutions trying to offer them this type of service. Many of the curators and directors are not really very digitally forward, so it will take quite a while, and it's also a generational thing, if I can say so. It's about how much the people who now are in a position to make decisions, how much they would themselves be able to engage with this, how much of a vision would they have when it comes to these digital tools. And we're not seeing that yet. So it's going to take a while. Another reaction was that a lot of institutions have not thought or have not negotiated digital copyrights for the artwork that is being presented or can be presented in such a digital format. The other positive argument in favor of using a tool like this would be that the artwork that is being displayed is not really limited. Like in some cases, we see that with the Google Digital Arts program, where you only have a 360 of a gallery, and then you can only rotate around and see, let's say, whatever has been photographed. But a tool like this would actually place three-dimensional artworks in space. The fact that we can support audio, that we can also have projections within this virtual space, opens up the entire gamut, let's say, of contemporary artworks. So we're not limited to paintings. We're not limited to, let's say, a 2D representation of a sculpture. All of those elements now can become interactive. So the sculptures can be rotated, can be zoomed in. Let's say if you would have an artist that has a body of work that comprises a lot of video work, that can be directly implemented in a virtual museum with this technology. Equally, if you have other types of, let's say, audio art or artworks that are a combination, let's say, of audio-visual elements, this can all be embedded and made available in a quite immersive way with a digital tool like this. So the other aspect to all of this is that a lot of the institutions, and no one actually knows right now how long this is going to take until we're going to see galleries reopen. But the fact that exhibitions have been lined up, there are programs that now probably galleries have planned exhibitions up until, I don't know, 2023, 24. There are sponsors lined up. So there's an entire program that could be even created and facilitated with this type of tool. That would be a very strong argument, for a museum to engage with a platform like this. So let's say our search and our discussions with potential collaborators is ongoing. But until now, we haven't really found yet the, let's say, the right partners to work with. We applied for UK government funding for an innovation project that would be almost like a proof of concept, for this sort of like platform. But the idea would be to get a real partner with one of the museums and institutions, so that the tool that we're creating is something that really directly really helps, like one of these museums or galleries. I also strongly believe that, let's say, an immersive digital experience of a gallery like this would also lend itself to become a valid extension of the museum, even in normal times when the galleries are open. And I see, and I've heard that from a lot of other people, including the Architecture Foundation as well, is that an institution can increase the reach of, let's say, the programming, the content, and have a more engaged audience. And that audience doesn't need to be local, or doesn't need to physically be tied to where the gallery is. So even in normal times, the audience can become global. So that might be another interesting argument, for using a platform like this. Yes, I'll have to check the time. I don't know. Yeah, we're pretty close to our Q&A session, and we're hopeful that we can develop these sort of platforms more. We have the options of creating virtual reality, but also to deploy via very normal web browsers. So the journey hasn't ended. I think it's only starting when it comes to these digital tools.
Thank you, Christian. That's fantastic. I mean, I thought that the last section of the talk, particularly, the technology seemed so potent, and having recently curated with Rosie, my colleague at the AF, an exhibition. I got our first sort of physical exhibition that we've done since we've started at the AF. It struck me it would be an enormously valuable bit of technology in order to help plan an exhibition, to have, to be able to locate the objects in an actual space in advance of doing the installation. And equally, it felt like you had the potential to completely reinvent what a catalogue of a temporary exhibition could be. I mean, I'd love to be able to, great exhibitions. I remember Bruce Nauman at the Hayward Gallery in 1995. I'd love to be able to, I've got the catalogue of that show, but I'd love to be able to actually, through this virtual medium, kind of go back and
this is like
see the show again.
Absolutely, the creation of archives, of exhibition gallery archives and libraries.
I mean, in a way, I'm more excited about that potential for temporary shows, having a record, and being able to rehearse them before installing, than the potential for you're making a whole digital replica of the British Museum, say. But I mean, have you had those sorts of conversations about? I mean, at the moment, clearly, the Royal Academy is sitting on an enormous Picasso show, which no one's going to, and they're doing Instagram tours of it. But this would feel like another way of providing access.
Absolutely. I mean, I'll also be quite honest. We're lacking the right contacts. Mm-hmm. It's pure and simple. You would need to have a platform. You would need to be able to connect with the right people, who are in the correct and right mindset to look at these tools. And we need advocates for that. And probably we're not the only sort of group or company in this sort of position. And yes, we have a head start because we've been doing this for quite a number of years now, and the expertise level is quite high. So I think with a bit of support, help, or guidance, it could even become an incredibly interesting and powerful tool or solution for someone.
Guys, if you've got questions, would you dump them in the chat box, and I can pitch them to Christian. I mean, I was also I was intrigued if the acoustic qualities of spaces. Do you think there will be advances in technology in allowing you to render the sounds of spaces as much as with the precision that you've been able to
Well,
bring to the visual replication.
yeah. So the interesting element to all of this is because even I would say yes. So even with let's say the traditional animation tools that we used to have, where you had the pre-rendered tools, there were already audio tools in place. So you could actually like like place certain emitting objects in 3D, and then you can capture that. Now we will have to. You would need to set up, let's say, a space or a room, from the point of view of the materials and the specification of those materials, so that you would get the how should I put it, the fingerprint of a specific room when it comes to audio and sound. And how far the entire space is open, reflective, etc. And it's about the materials, it's about the people, the amount of people as well. But I would say to a very high degree, this would also be possible.
And I know Google have been working with museums, making effectively kind of visual record of the collections of museums that you can walk around. It's not as sophisticated as what you were showing us today, but
yeah,
I do think that's beginning to broker a conversation, that will encourage institutions to think further in that direction.
Well, that's the other sort of like big argument for museums. Well, we've got Google, so why should we be using something like this? And let's say it's very hard to explain to museums that like what makes them special is not that they are on Google. What would make them special is the fact that their physical existence and their spaces are special, and the experience is unique, and that can be also expressed with a tool like this. Just using, let's say, Google Digital Arts is great because you can reach the masses quite easily. So it's all based on a 360-degree technology. It's these days it's quite a simple technology. Let's put it this way. But with a tool like what we're proposing, you can create that special environment and the experience of the space as well, that you wouldn't be able to do with let's say a Google type experience.
Sure.
I mean, it's commendable, Google being in a position to archive and to capture all of the artworks and document that and create a library that would be open to a lot of people. Maybe like our approach is by far too sophisticated for something that can be quite simple as well. I would accept that argument too, but we're pushing ourselves, and this is probably what we've always done, is we've come up with ideas that either were a bit too early, or then later on had been implemented, in another way.
So we have a question from Katherine McNeil. Katherine, yeah. I'm going to unmute you. Katherine, you got the mic. Hello. Otherwise, I'm going.
Sure. Hello. Thanks for such. Can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Great. Thanks for such an inspiring lecture on a beautiful rainy afternoon in London. It kind of took me to another place. I love this idea of architecture moving because of course it does. And I'm the course director at Coventry University. I know there's a number of my undergraduate students who I'm going to share this session with. And I'm interested to hear what you would suggest for architecture students to start, how to start in this world, in this beautiful, immersive, moving world of architecture.
I think most courses now include some form of 3D basic knowledge. So that is probably the base for absolutely everything. If you're an architecture student, you will have to be hungry for, let's say, experiences and knowledge when it comes to these tools. And also, I think what's absolutely crucial is, let's say, an artistic understanding or feeling or substrate to all of this. So it should be a combination of let's say an avid dealing with the latest digital technologies in combination with a sophistication when it comes to, let's say, artistic expression. I very often, particularly when it comes to time-based media, I love the, or I'm very often make a comparison to dance and to choreography. And there are so many parallels when it comes to camera movement, speeds, differing speeds, the perception, angles, you know, everything. It's got so much to do with scenography, choreography, light. And obviously sort of like visual arts. So this is what I would say for particularly for architecture students. You know, get your technology ducks in a row, but equally, you know, try to develop that sensitivity when it comes to visual representation and understanding of artistic visual representation.